A little note on Trump, I suppose, before we start on what's going on here in Downing Street. We have yet to see or hear the Trump-Starmer conversation. Many people saying to me that, everything's fine. The relationship's absolutely no problem at all. The fact that, Starmer wasn't invited to the inauguration doesn't matter. But it kind of does, because he's already behind several world leaders who will have had conversations with Trump. So, there used to be the race to be the first person to talk to the new president. He's already lost that. And who knows how long it's going to be before Trump deigns to have a conversation with him.
Yeah, I mean, the really interesting thing is that most White House, there's not a lot of access, but a lot of influence, i.e. that, you can't really get to them. Once you can get to them, you can influence them. The reverse is true with Trump, which is that there's lots of access, not much influence, in that he tends to reflect the opinion of the last person who spoke to him. So having that regular communication is really important, which is why, obviously, people like Nigel Farage were always very keen to go over there and talk to him. And so I do think that while we've got important strategic interests, it's clear that already I don't think Donald Trump and Keir Starmer are going to be particularly getting on very personally.
No, exactly right. And we see from the Times this morning that, Trump's focus is very much not on the UK necessarily, specifically, but it's very much on foreign companies and foreign countries coming to America and trying to do business there, because it looks as though he's going to bring in all sorts of steep tax rises on foreign nationals working in the US, as well as also companies wishing to set up there. So as much as it might well be a free and open trade zone, it won't be for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is fascinating, is that, one of the few main political principles of Donald Trump's philosophy has been tariffs. It's been something he's talked about for 35 years, something he ran on in the 80s. He has a very zero-sum game with the world. And so, as you say, putting more taxes on foreign staff, putting more taxes effectively on foreign goods, that is going to be a real challenge to kind of the post-1945 world order, which America has done very well out of.
Yeah, of course. And Peter Mandelson's name keeps coming up in the frame. Not very sure whether he's going to be welcomed with open arms by the White House and the new teams in there. And now suddenly Ed Miliband's brother, David Miliband, is offering very generously to solve the problem by stepping into the ambassador's shoes himself.
Well, there's that tact and charm which almost won in the Labour leadership. Look, I think that David Miliband has been spotted a lot around Westminster in recent months. I bumped into him myself, actually. Yeah, walking around. So he's been having lots of meetings. Now, of course, he's the head of International Rescue, not the Thunderbirds theme, but the international aid charity in Washington, which earns a fortune. So I think that he's clearly someone who wants to get more back involved in the kind of US-UK relationship. But I think that it's more likely that Mandelson will get appointed at some point, and that it's certain members, as I say, going back to that first point I made about lots of Trump people say they speak for him, say they'll do this and that. I think it's more likely than not that Mandelson will be appointed as ambassador.
Yeah, well, let's wait and see. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves is in Davos, been there since, I think, Sunday night, Monday morning. She's speaking today, I think, alongside Jonathan Ashworth at this, bun fest, I suppose you might call it, where very, very wealthy people get together to do a bit of snowboarding, drinking, and occasional conversation about how the world should be run. She's going to be very, very hard-pressed, is she not, to make Britain out to be a great place to come to invest in, because according to the Mail this morning, she's got the biggest job slump on her hands since COVID. Fresh alarms over the faltering economy, warnings from investors of a death spiral of debt. And the economy really is in a pretty bad way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that certainly Labour have accelerated an existing process. They came into office, they were pretty downbeat about the economy. They will obviously put up national insurance, and these things have consequences. And I think the danger is there's a perception in Westminster and some elements of the city, I think, that they just simply see the private sector as a kind of cash cow to milk it. And actually that's not the case. And growth is a very difficult thing to, lots of different things to make it right. And so going to Davos actually, in some ways, I think shows a bit being behind the times. I mean, no one's really going to Davos from the look of things. It seems to be very much a yesteryear zeitgeist rather than...
I mean, I said this yesterday. When you see David Beckham turning up at Davos, you kind of go, well, maybe it's not all that it was formerly cracked up to be when it used to be the place where world leaders went. I mean, Donald Trump's not there. Starmer's not there. I don't know how many. The Russians stopped going a few years ago because of the Ukraine war. The Arab world kind of still occasionally goes there because they quite like a bit of, Switzerland in the winter time and a bit of snow. But it's really not as influential as it used to be, is it?
No, and I think also you've got to remember that conferences is one thing, making consultations is another. It's actually taking decisions that's what's defined to you at the Treasury. And so, for instance, the reports yesterday that she might be approving Heathrow expansion, I think that would matter a lot more to the money men in the city than turning up for 3 days, as you say, having a bit of wine, going on the slopes, and be sitting to another empty, soulless room in Davos.
Yeah, quite. And let's talk a bit about Keir Starmer's position as well, because he came out yesterday sort of all guns blazing, if you like, talking about how it was awful that there's terrible things that you can see online, and he's going to crack down on lone wolf terrorism, because he's apparently only discovered that it's a new thing that's been going on for several years. He's blaming all sorts of internet sites for the Raducanu Southport rampage, and basically talking about kind of clamping down on the tech moguls of this world. But he seems to have got it completely wrong again, because all the journalists who were at the press conference yesterday and many sort of legal brains afterwards have said, this nonsense that he's talking about, exactly what you can say and what you can't say when somebody is arrested for a crime. He's managed to get that completely mangled, hasn't he?
I think that one of the big frustrations about Keir Starmer is he often treats it like a civil service, and he says, well, these are the arguments, and sets them out. The point is that you have to make a judgment call on probability of risk and the balance of risk. And of course, there is the risk of contempt of court. That has to be weighed, of course, about the information being released in a timely and transparent manner. And I think the frustration, and not just about this case, but other ones, is that there's a perception among journalists that police forces across the country have got much slower in recent years at releasing information.
Yes.
They hide behind process. They're unwilling to answer questions, and that, frankly, you may like it or not, but in an age now of digital media, there is a vacuum, and that gets filled. And I do hope that this encourages a reconsideration about how that information is being put out.
And how
because,
it's
frankly,
done, But I mean, in the Telegraph, you've got Merseyside detectives saying they wanted to provide details about the killer's background, Rudy Cabana, but in fact, they wanted to include his religion, his crimes, but they were warned not to do so by the Crown Prosecution Service.
I mean, this other thing is that, are we saying now that there can't be any information released between when the incident happens and then obviously when they're charged? Well, I understand that, but that could be many months in some cases, and I do think that there needs to be a discussion around the balance between disclosure information, and as you say, no one wants to prejudice trial, but equally, how likely is that going to be? And I suppose that's the risk in all. There's risk in everything.
Well, there is, but there was a time when from the arrest until the charge, you could say pretty much anything you wanted. And that's kind of been worn away over time by what I would call cautious lawyers who have kind of said, oh, we don't want to blame somebody for saying the wrong thing and getting somebody a mistrial. But that's never been the case. Once the charge comes in, that's when the case becomes sub judice, and that's when newspapers and everybody else have to be very careful what they say. But until the moment the charge comes, it's not an active case.
Absolutely, and I think that you've got to remember that initially, of course, there was all this misinformation online about him being an asylum seeker or whatever. And I just think it's in everyone's interest that we just get the information out there as quickly as possible. And then people have to act responsibly.
Well, surely what they should have then done, the government and the Crown Prosecution Service and the police, they should come out and say, look, he's not an asylum seeker, he's not somebody who's come over on a small boat, he's not a Muslim, and this is who he is, and this is what we know about him. We know that he was involved with Prevent, we know that he's had previous problems with violent thoughts and blah, blah, blah. Just give us the information. That would have killed it stone dead.
I think there's a very good case for that, and all I can say is that I hope that in future ones we do kind of consider that, because we're not in an analog age anymore, in the digital age, and people have a real desire to know about these things, and I think some people acted irresponsibly, clearly, but also I think it should prompt some reflection at the highest levels about open and timely.
Yes.
I think that's timely disclosure of information.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right.